Hi, welcome to First Geek Congregation. Today we're actually going to be foregoing the usual discussions on culture and religion and various religious outlooks and how we deal with things with religion. We're pretty much foregoing that entirely. I'm going to say 99.9%. We probably have a couple of spots where we brush up with it. What we're actually going to talk about is sex. I mean, we're talking the nuts and bolts. We're not even talking sexuality. We're talking the actual nuts and bolts of sex. And there's a reason for this. We were supposed to do one First Geek on sex and sexuality, and it kind of exploded. In fact, it was too large of a topic, so it ran over to the next. Yes, that's what she said. I've done that joke all 3 times now. It ran over from the first week to the next week, and then into the next week. 3 weeks in a row, we talked about it. But one of the major points was that as a society, actually worldwide, we have a problem with sex. We don't talk about sex. We don't educate our children particularly well. Abstinence-only education, for instance, actually exists. This is a problem. And statistics show that it's a problem. We as adults should be grown up and be able to talk about it and understand it. And we actually don't. We get the small amount of the nuts and bolts kind of figured out. But beyond that, there's a whole lot of lies and misconceptions. So what I did on the First Geek website, we put up a survey, which is basically one question. What did you want to tell us? It boiled down to giving people a platform to say, oh, well, I had always heard this. Is this true? This is what my parents told me. This is what my partner told me. These are the things that guys or girls had told me earlier in life that I found out was wrong. We gave people a platform to speak up and say, well, these people have lied to me, or is this myth true? And actually, it was kind of interesting. I got a good number of responses back, and so we're gonna hit a lot of that here. Surprisingly, I'm not sure how to say this. Some people have misconceptions from really what boils down to the very beginning, with even the basic equipment involved. I was a little shocked by this, actually. I guess, I don't know, somewhere along the lines, I got enough of an education on sexuality that I know what the parts of a woman are and I know what the parts of a guy are. I figured everybody had that many. Apparently, that's not really true. And I was, and you know, there's always the joke. And I always thought, honest to goodness, I always thought this was a joke. The clitoris on a female was a huge mystery to guys. I thought this was a joke. Little did I know that that's not. No, actually, there's a lot of guys who really, honestly, don't know. And to the point, there's a lot of guys who still think things like that women pee out of their vagina or out of their clitoris. I did not realize that as a society, this is how damaging it has been by the fact that we don't talk about it. And there are women who think that. You know, I'm not going to disbelieve you. I would assume if you have the equipment, if you have that piece of equipment, you know all about it. That would be my assumption. However, no, on both for both genders. I don't know. You know, it really just befuddled me how much. But also, so here's the thing. So I had 2 weeks to do this, to get all these questions. We're not talking thousands of questions. I mean, just so everybody understands. To take these questions and turn them into something. To look up all the research on questions. Some of them I knew the answer to, and some of them I'm like, I don't know. You know, I guess I'll go find out. And this led to a problem. I said we were going to attack this all with science. There's plenty of science out there on sex, because in 1948 was the Kinsley report on men and sexuality. Actually, let me me correct myself. Sexual behavior in the human male was 1948, and sexual behavior in the human female was 1953. So this was the big revolution. Somebody stopped and wrote about sex, and actually asked people about sex. And well, sexual behavior in the human male is actually only based off of 300 people. And sexual behavior in the human female is based off of 6,000 women responding. But I assumed, hey, somebody did a good start. So I'm sure by now, there is plenty of research. There is plenty of good, solid, because I wanted to be able to answer every question and say, read this paper by so-and-so. What I got was not what I expected. Come to find out, not only did we not talk about it, we really don't study it in what I would normally consider to be scientific fashions. The Kelsey report, for instance. I said Kinsley the first time. It's Kelsey report, excuse me. The Kelsey report. The Kelsey Institute still exists. And a lot of what they do is they take a lot of these studies that are done and they bring them all together. So it's in one area. It makes sense. But then I discovered exactly how flawed that is. So while we go along, I'm going to try my best to answer all of these things with what I felt was the strongest argument, or the largest sample size, or the best done paper. Do not take me as 100% fact, because I don't know.
Apparently, there's more myths than fact on it.
For some reason, I just thought of NPH on unicorn on some of these topics. For some reason, I just went through it.
And how many of you have taken statistics at some point in your life? Oh, this is going to be much easier. I can lie the whole way. No. The importance of statistics is the idea that, and I mention this because we're going to run into this a number of times, is that you can extrapolate from 20 people how it applies to 200 people, how it applies to 200,000 people.
But if you just happen to get to 20 people who are, deathly afraid of sharks, or, who...
Well, clown fetishes, or something like that.
If that's the sample that you take, if you're assuming that those 20 people represent the whole, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. And this is the problem. And in fact, let's say you're a college here in the U.S.
Okay.
and you're in New York.
You fit lots of people.
So what?
You fit lots of people.
And you get. I'm gonna ignore you.
It's huge.
Just to get in.
And you're going to find the average height of the human male. And you do it on your college campus with a sample set of 200 people. Actually, what you found out was the regional height for somebody who is between 18 and 24, and all these little variables. What you did is you found too small of a sample set. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to hit here, I'm going to basically be flagging it every once in a while, going, okay, this is great, but these guys only did 200 people or 300 people. Because that's how bad it is. It's really how bad it is. I'm surprised. Seriously, some of the most important stuff that we feel that we do, the thing that we use to sell advertising, this thing that we, for lack of a better term, what we lust after, we haven't studied it thoroughly? Really? How did we do this? And of course, studying anything online.
Yeah.
The number of articles I read that had no citation, that was a sex expert, and I use air quotes with that, because then I would have to hunt something else down. I finally found a paper, an academic paper, on the topic and go, everything that guy said was bullshit, or gal, because this paper says completely otherwise. So anyways, here's the first thing. We're talking about sex. What is sex? Because this actually is really, really germane to all of these papers. And I find a huge problem with it. The definition of sex for a lot of people, the first thing they think of is intercourse, sexual intercourse.
Yeah.
Well, but there's also, anal sex is still sex. And sex, well, masturbation, oral sex, utilizing toys, etc., etc. There's actually this whole field. And oddly enough, a lot of these papers take one little chunk and then they call that sex. And their title of their paper will be about sex. Actually, what they're talking about is sexual intercourse, one little facet of sex. So whenever we're talking about this, sometimes it's important to remember these guys and gals were extremely narrow in what they were looking at. It's, trust me, the papers are peppered, back and forth on to age group of who wrote them and sex and everything else. It's not like just guys are setting up this, just girls are setting it. I was a little disturbed when I read an article on anal sex, and I come to the end, and it's a little gray-haired lady who is obviously somebody's grandma. I don't know how I feel about this, but it wasn't right. Okay. So what?
Oh, I was just thinking, there's a Kids in the Hall sketch where there's like aliens who've been doing anal probes and stuff and to learn about the human race, and they're like, we've been given anal probes for the past 50 years, and the only thing that we found out is 1 out of 10 people don't mind. So that was slightly lining up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's actually pretty funny. And in some ways kind of applicable. Because also, with these studies, came the problem of it may sound simple. Penis size. How hard is it to figure out how long a penis is? Can't be that hard, right? You just measure. Well, come to find out, it's a lot more difficult than one would think, because there has to be a standardized way of doing it. You have to measure it all the same way, in the same way, and the same hardness and everything else. Apparently, some of the studies had not used exactly the same methodology over time. So I've mentioned before, I think I've said, three different studies, three different answers. How large is the average penis? Part of the problem is sample size, and part of the problem was methodology, where they're measuring from, how they're measuring. Oh, and by the way, the physical fitness of the person matters. Additionally, how they got hard mattered. Everything mattered on this. So again, as we're going through some of this stuff, don't forget, I will have stuff that I've ran into multiple answers for, and sometimes it's a methodology issue. The answer, by the way, when they did a study of 200, somebody came up with an answer of 5.9 is the average penis size. Look at this study of 15,000. Actually came out to 5.1. In other words, we're, again, not as big as we think we are. By the way, most guys think they are larger than they are, but they think they're smaller than what the average size of a penis is. Why did we buy big trucks? Apparently, because we think everybody else has a bigger penis. Which I gotta give my Marshall credit for driving VW bug. Obviously, he's very confident in himself. Now, oddly enough, one of the things that also has been wrong, has been a problem, is rampant racism. We've always heard the joke that Japanese have little penises. Oh, and Asian women have sideways vaginas. And has anybody else heard that? Seriously?
First time in my life.
Seriously? Oh no, I had heard that
I'm
growing up.
not surprised there's that kind of bullshit out there, but I mean, literally, there was an area where somebody had it as recently as 1970, where they had a tribal that they had the Hottentot, the Venus Hottentot, her body parts on display so that they could, link her to a chimpanzee. And this was a lady that died in at least the last century or further back when there was slavery, and she got brought over to Europe to basically perform for people there because her village had certain practices with getting prepared for marriage, and her areas were bigger than the Europeans thought that they should be. So they from running into this particular village where there was bigger posteriors and things like that, they basically extrapolated that African women were closer to chimpanzees and all that, and they put it in a freaking museum, and it was there till 1970.
Gotcha.
It was crazy.
No, I believe you. And after having run through some of this stuff, I some of the stats I ran across surprisingly kind of blew the cultural mindset that I had heard in those times. But on top of that, the number of spots where there was rampant racism involved. Seriously?
If you're going to see it, you're going to see it more in the sex area, because that's where a lot of the that's where it doesn't get challenged often.
Well, it is a good point. I mean, let's face it. If everybody's embarrassed by it, then nobody's going to challenge it to start with. And second of all, we use it as a way of pumping ourselves up. One of them was a global penis size infographic. This guy had done. Now keep in mind, you would have to require. This was not done off of like 15,000 samples in each country or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually done with really, really horrible set of methodologies. But what he did is he. So what?
They went out and found 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically created a chart that was from 3.6 inches to 7.1 inches. By the way, 7.1 inches would actually put the guy outside the norms. That would be a very large piece. And did this huge graphic that got a bunch of attention. Sorry, incoming message. That is not. I'm not buying red. What?
Incoming message from the big giant hit.
Which basically what the guy did is he put all of Asia into the smallest category, and South America into the largest categories. And so when somebody starts to dig into this guy's big infographic he did, well, his infographic was actually based off of a paper that somebody wrote quite a ways back that was flawed back in the 80s. That paper had actually been based off of something that somebody wrote in the 70s, which was also flawed. So yeah, not only did we have a lie, we had a lie that kept being repeated over and over. But since it plays well, because on one end it says, "Ha, we're bigger than they are," and on the other end, well, what the hell's with these guys? These guys are even bigger than us, so we're kind of afraid of big penises. So yeah, I mean, so throughout all this, not only we have horrible information, we have people actively spreading lies in a scientific community. What the hell? And the worst part is, not only is spreading lies, but there's a certain adoption of it. Oh, it must be true. Bob said it. Bob's got a PhD. He's probably right. Bob, present your
authority.
research. Authority is a problem, and once you believe that somebody's an authority and just automatically accept it, it happens in the scientific community just as it does everywhere else. Which is why the idea of peer review exists. Everything. One of the other things I looked for in a lot of these papers, were they peer reviewed? Did somebody else pick up the paper and read it and not say, "Ah, no, this dude's an asshole"? That helped bring about whether or not I thought that was a valid piece. Oddly enough, the whole penis size issue comes with a couple of other interesting problems with sexuality. Condoms. We'll start off with condom sizes are not condom sizes, are not condom sizes, are not condom sizes. Apparently, we see advertisements for XL condoms, extra large, and then apparently I don't know that anybody sells a small condom or that anybody would ever purchase it. Couldn't find out. Was like women will tell you about bras. Bras are always the wrong size because they're designed for a general setup. Apparently, condoms are the same way. Condoms are not a one size actually fits all situation. I do not know this. I'd always been taught that it was. Oh, there's no such thing as being too large for a condom, being too small for a condom. They're all the same size. No, actually, they're not. In fact, to the point now, there's a couple of manufacturers who are actually manufacturing condoms along a finer grain scale for length and width, or I should say girth, not width, because they don't fit right. The importance of them fitting right, sexually transmitted diseases and pregnancy. If they don't fit right, they tend to tear. They tend to bind. They tend to cut off part of the enjoyment of it. And just to be clear, because I think we're pretty much done with penises for the moment. Oh, actually, there was one more thing beyond this. I'm pretty certain everybody in the room understands a pill will not make your penis larger. Apparently, there's enough people that believe that penises can be enlarged by pills that entire companies have sprung up over the years, like Insight. Bob's got a little more spring in his step. No, Bob's in jail because it was all a scam. There isn't one. There is not a non-surgical way to make it larger. You can make it look larger. Apparently, you can shave or lose weight. Apparently, losing weight makes it actually does make it show a little more. Okay. Before I move on, because I think I covered. Oh, there was one more thing.
Yeah, penis is covered there.
Funny you should make that joke. Circumcision.
That's what I was going for.
Because one of the questions come up. Why? Well, there's not a good reason. There's actually not.
Mr. Kellogg.
So what?
Mr. Kellogg.
Actually, it's worse than that. There's more history involved there. Kellogg is one of the contributors to the situation. At one time in the United States, was not a whole lot of circumcision. Surprisingly, it was a combination of World War I, World War II, and some OBGYNs that actually caused circumcision to be pushed forward even further with technology, along with the social belief that masturbation was bad. And because masturbation was bad, for some reason, clipping the foreskin reduced masturbation. I still haven't figured out that argument yet. Why that was supposed to reduce masturbation, but supposedly it did. There was also some religious beliefs beyond it, but surprisingly, the reasoning for, when asked, the reasoning behind most of them had little to do with it. had a little to do with religion. 1970s, you had Dr. Spock. Dr. Spock was an advocate, and he was the book everybody owned on bringing up children at one time. I shouldn't say everyone. The next generation of semi-hippie parents. And Dr. Spock was a big advocate of it. There is potentially still reasons for circumcision. HIV, and a friend of mine last night who's in the know about a lot of this, looked at me and says, "Here, you want me to blow your mind from it? The rate of HIV infection is double for somebody who's not circumcised." I'm like, why? He goes, "They don't know." So I had to look into it. I had to look in to see if this is bullshit or not. Come to find out, it's not. The disease rates among those who are circumcised versus uncircumcised, circumcision does seem to quell certain diseases. It's not that you don't ever get them, it's just lower likelihood. There's not a great answer for it either. So to answer your question, why circumcision? Because we do. At one point in the United States, we were at 90%. We're back to getting down into the 50% range for circumcision. And on top of this, I had kind of an epiphany moment the other day when a friend of mine posted, I believe it's Nigeria, has finally banned the process of female circumcision. Which, if nobody knows what the process of female circumcision is, it's pretty horrendous. And I had a moment of, yeah, that's awesome. I am glad to hear this. Because it's mutilation. Well, wait a minute. If I object to it being done to women, and of course, telling you more about me than you ever want to know, I'm circumcised, so I've never questioned it.
Never had a chance to.
Yeah. So, and of course, there's a bunch of questions that goes with it. Are penises shorter because of circumcision? Are they less sensitive to it because of circumcision? There's a couple other questions that went with that, and the answer is no one knows. Not really. There's no definitive answer to those. There appears to be no difference in size due to circumcision. However, in general, however, due to botched circumcisions, there are instances where people will be slightly deformed and or the skin will be slightly too small. But that's supposedly a very, very small amount. The problem is small sample sets. So we don't really know. Additionally, when it comes to sensation, it's a very hard thing to quantify whether or not there really is a loss in sensation because of them or not. Nobody's going to definitive answer. There was another one, and another question with that, and with circumcision, and I don't know that I wrote it down. I didn't. Okay. That before I move on, we've talked about a lot of penis here. More penis than I ever wish to have talked about. Does anybody here have any thoughts or questions? Okay, groovy. Yeah, it didn't take so long.
I think we can handle a little more penis.
Maybe you. Then I went on and because obviously I've gotten penises down. So it's horrible jokes. I personally am a fan of vagina, and so I figured I would go and learn more. Racist. What?
No.
Let's face it, I have my parts. I'm much more interested in the gal parts. And this is where things got weird. This was my sign of exactly how weird things were going to get for the rest of this little trek. Because which I'm just going to admit. No. Actually, And I'm going to put this up here. This will be a crude drawing. I apologize. This is an accurate enough representation of a vagina for everybody.
For a whiteboard.
For a whiteboard drawing. Well, and the first thing, this is not a vagina. This is a vagina. This is the later, major, minor, etc., etc. And apparently, this confuses some men.
It's genitalia.
That is genitalia. Yes. And apparently, that confuses some men. They're also confused on this whole little area. Everything except for that hole apparently is confusing some men, gentlemen. I know. And I mentioned this because we're going to go back to something that we talked about before, the virginity myth. This bit right here. Vagina. Just a little piece of tissue. It doesn't even cover the vagina. It's actually, well, slightly covers the vagina. Not much. This little piece of tissue is what we think of when it comes to virginity for a female. And then when that is broken, it's done, and the woman's no longer a female. We've talked about, or female, no longer a female, no longer a virgin. We've talked about before that this actually rips, tears, gets broken under a number of circumstances, including any number of them that aren't sex.
Horseback riding.
Horseback riding, just a whole list of them. Oddly enough, some things I did not know. That piece of tissue, a lot of them grows back anyways. Apparently that's talked about common. I did not know this. So what? Dick move. But it left me with a question. This is why I said this is like, I think I said on Facebook, this is 99.9% non-religious. It has left me with a question after we were talking about virginity before, is, well, if they stoned women who weren't virgins, and they usually had witnesses, literally people in the room, to witness whether or not the girl was a virgin on their marriage night, how did they not end up with a whole lot of women stoned? Well, here's why. Because a lot of times the blood that it all had very little to do with the hymen. It actually had to do with the fact you had a couple who are completely inexperienced at sex and performance anxiety. Not a whole lot of people are really geared towards that whole having sex in a room with other people watching. It ends up being mild vaginal tear and micro tears that cause the problem due to lack of lubrication and lack of foreplay. Like, ooh, that sucks for them. The whole hymen thing ends up being, in fact, actually, by the way, some women, that isn't that great during the first couple of times of sex anyways. Just the way they're structured. So all of this little bit about the hymen and how important it is absolute bullshit. Absolutely. We knew it was absolute bullshit before, but now we really know, after looking at the science of it, it really is bullshit.
I always thought it was a freshen seal. It covered the whole thing like a top of a Pringles can.
You know what? I actually thought that when I was young. I swear to God, I thought that.
I thought there was like English print on it and everything.
Well,
if broken, do not consume.
Okay, I didn't quite think that, but
No, wanting myself somehow.
so what?
I had to redeem myself somehow. And you opened it.
This thing's kind of a mystery to me. I'll explain. I never understood how women could have kids and never have sex again after that. I knew these muscles called Kegels involved in it. And that helped with the muscle control around it. I've had sex with women who have had kids before. So about the same to me. Well, come to find out, this whole bit is actually quite miraculous. This is the worst drawing of a vaginal cavity ever. So, you know that the vaginal cavity is ridiculously interesting. Well, one, vaginas are kind of cool. They're self-made. For the most part, which brings one of the myths, by the way.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
Douching, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Not even just douching, but one of the questions asked, or I shouldn't say questions asked, one of the things told to me was that somebody had actually believed at one time the Coca-Cola douching thing.
Oh! Oh!
They had not actually tried it,
Oh my
but they
goodness.
believed it
Oh.
because they had heard it from other people. Okay, so this little bit of here is actually pretty impressive because it keeps its own stabilized system. It tends to deal with biological entities fairly well on its own. In fact, kind of find out the whole idea of douching is apparently a bad idea. I was not aware of this until probably about 2 years ago. It was a discussion with my wife. Something was said about it. And I don't remember it. She said, "Yeah, it's bad." And I'm like, "See that?" I'm like, "What?" And had to have it explained to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. But how would they have survived for
Well,
millennia previously if it wasn't, again, self-cleaning and everything else? But also the tissue it's made out of. A whole lot of muscles involved, and a whole lot of tissue, and a whole lot of blood flow involved here. Couldn't find out, because my question was, okay, if you think a kid, how big is this thing? Well, it's actually not very big. But again, that whole methodology problem and the whole sample size problem and everything else, I wanted to know how large a vagina was. It seemed like it
You're not gonna have the same rush to measure this area.
Well, hang on a minute. My reasoning was this. It is recommended most women go have a well woman check once a year. There's already somebody there. And so why doesn't the guy just go, "Hey, what if I measure this real quick? We're not going to keep your name or anything. I just want to measure this for a study." It would be easy. Piece of cake. No. Apparently not.
Would it be easy if your doctor, you were already there for your checkup? Hey, would you mind if you just let me measure your dick real quick? Just for
Yeah, you know, I
study.
wouldn't mind. I'm a science sort of guy.
It's easier
Really?
for that because it's an external area.
I've had to STD. You know what? I've had STD tests and things like that before in my life. Measuring my penis,
How
a lot
about
easier.
if they did it differently? What if they tried to measure your ass? I mean, you'd be like, what?
Okay, you have a fair point there. Excuse me, can I measure this one? No!
I just want to see how big
What are
it
you
gets.
doing?
You take some pretty massive shits every now and then. I need to know. That's for science.
You have,
Just saying.
you have a valid point there. You have an extremely valid point there.
Problem solved.
And
So
you
anyways,
don't have like a dick-sized contest going on with the vag. Oh, my vag is so much bigger than yours. You don't do that. That's not what you do.
Well, I being a guy, I don't really know these things for certain, but okay, I'm going to take your word on it.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying.
Uh,
All right, ladies, whip them out.
this thing called prolapse. Yes, they can.
And here come the torrent of tweets. The prolapse of tweets.
Welcome to live events. Anyways. Oh, come on, pull up. Anyways, okay, so I asked the question, how large is a vagina? And again, kind of like with the penis thing, the answers I got back were pretty varied. But they also fall into a couple of things. Well, one of the myths of sex, because we always hear the term loose women, and I'm implying in the concept there that if a gal has a lot of sex, it's loose. No, doesn't happen. But actually, apparently, the sexual activity may actually be good at keeping it tighter. Seriously, could you pull up the article? Pull it up.
I take it when you were doing your research, you had your safe search filter on. Nah.
Nah.
Nah, that could live dangerously. I like to wade into the search of 2 billion hits.
But there were a couple of articles that stood out a little bit more than others to the fact that they actually went, no. You don't want just to know the answer to that. Because guys think this is a vagina. What you want to know the answer to is this too big? Is this too big? Is this too big? And is this too small? Let's see. This was the best. Oddly enough, this came from Women's Health magazine, which honestly, for everything else, was some of the worst sources. Men's health magazines and women's health magazines were some of the worst sources for information because most of the time they did not have any link back to actual papers. This was somebody sat down and wrote it, and then maybe I'll take my word for it because I'm a journalist. I have a computer. Look, everyone, that typing monkey. He can fit in. Oh, whoops, this one. Somebody had actually gone through the effort to actually try and break it down into all the parts and get as accurate as they could answers to what all the parts were, size-wise. The interesting problem that they faced was there's really three sets of data that should belong here. One of them is was the female sexually active. Apparently that matters a lot.
That's nice.
What?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, my mark.
Look at D. I was like, sexually active. What does that mean?
If they're not sexually active, and had kids, and have they had kids? Because the answers vary a little bit based on those bits. The had kids part, for instance, for some women, matters a lot. Muscle tearing and a number of other issues can occur that leave them with less muscle control. The less muscle control ends up not bringing the walls of the vagina back where they belong. Oddly enough, a set of exercises available called Kegels that will improve upon this situation. But not in all cases. Sexually active versus non-sexually active made a difference on the sides, considerably. Or not considerably, somewhat, sorry. The interesting part was there's also the measurements for the labia major and labia minor, because apparently, just like guys have a problem with size of penis, apparently there now has become a trend with women and beautification of the genital area. Apparently some women think their labia is too large or too small, and now have surgical correction to improve upon this. I had read about this before, and I read up on this more, and
So that's a real thing.
that really is a thing. Oddly enough,
I thought it was a joke.
no. And oddly enough, one of the sources to blame for it, Playboy, Penthouse, and some of those magazines, who airbrushed a lot because they wanted vaginas, they wanted the genital area to look a specific way, and to look apparently as most appealing as possible, which resulted in women thinking this is what is a beautiful
Just like
vagina.
with other images of women. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, okay, if anybody had not guessed, learning anything about human body or sexuality from magazine, from porno mags, or from Playboy, or from pornography, is the worst possible thing you can do. I'm trying to find a good way of saying it. I'm not going to say that it's not sex. It's not healthy sex. Most people do not have to worry about whether or not the camera can see the vagina while you're having sex, for instance. Most people are also not built with sculpted abs, and with women who have perfect bodies and things like this. Nor do most people have makeup put on them before having sex. I didn't realize how much makeup was involved in sex. Because apparently there is, according to pornography. Apparently a lot of people in porn end up with a lot of blemish covering and things like this. I'm like, what?
I always put lipstick on my dick. Anybody else?
I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave the jokes alone. Part of them because it's going to get you in trouble with your wife. So.
I'll stop.
Go away.
Okay.
It was asking me if I wanted it threw me a pop-up to ask me if I wanted a bikini body.
A bikini body?
No, I'll pass on bikini body. Yeah, apparently because I'm on the women's side and some men woman. Anyways, so we got all the bits, and theoretically, these are good numbers. The article was absolutely fantastic. Lots and lots of information. Not a whole lot of really There we go. Not a whole lot of good sample set because there's only 158 women. So these numbers applied to 158 women within a 57-year age range, age span in Britain. So it sounds good.
So we're talking to the British, so that's
Yeah.
that's definitely going to help us with our sexuality studies there. Yeah.
So yeah, it's because the Brits are so known for their ongoing sexuality. So in theory, no, maybe it gives at least an idea.
Now, of course, I'm an American talking about it, saying that.
Well, in Texas, everything's bigger. So, you know, I must admit, I enjoy watching your wife do this one.
I know, it's great.
She does it to you a lot, doesn't she?
It's like Kip from Futurama. What do I call it, Kip? Sex Lexi, yeah.
Now, since I'm on here, and I mentioned it, for anybody who's, this is not so much for us in the room, I think we already got it. For anybody who doesn't know what female circumcision is, and the reason why we could question human sanity some days,
Skin crawl.
what they do is they take a young girl, a baby, and they want to make sure, this is horrible to say, they basically want to make sure that she doesn't enjoy sex. So, and there's 4 different ways that it can be done. Some of them involve removing and cutting part of the hood. Some of them involve removing the clitoris entirely. And then some of them involve removing basically just about everything and leaving a small hole to urinate and a small hole for menstruation. And I mean a very small hole for menstruation. And later, to have sex for the first time, it's going to be extremely painful or require surgery to reopen the opening. It is a fairly horrific procedure that is slowly but surely being banned throughout the entire world. It's still practiced in some areas, and even though it's banned and carries jail time in many countries, it still happens in some places. But this is the complete removal. In this case, this is the complete removal of just about anything a woman could ever enjoy about sex. Period. They will never be right again. Now, go back to the human side for a second.
Why don't you throw some fluorescent pictures in there while you're at it so we can see? No.
Get some nice lighting. I'm more of an LED fan.
Way of the future.
Now, enjoy me in here. Anyways, I'm going after something, and I lost it in my head.
You were talking about female circumcision a minute ago.
I just finished female circumcision. I wanted to like really dig into the vagina for a minute. All right. So here's the thing. At one time, there was a belief that this didn't have nerves. I'm not kidding. They thought the vagina had no nerves. And that anything that a woman complained about was either caused right at the end, opening, or with psychosomatic. This was problematic when they do things like removal of warts and things like this without any anesthetic, or even flat out surgery without anesthetic, because women obviously didn't feel anything better. Nowadays, modern days, we know better. There are groups in here. However, according to some studies, 75% of women don't actually experience orgasm strictly from a penis in this. The reason I mention this, because we're going to go back to that thing that apparently guys find mysterious, like clitoris. And we're going to do the crudest possible drawing here. I apologize. We're going to say this is the clitoris here. This is really the crudest possible drawing here in this situation. There's the mystical thing called a G-spot. May or may not exist. Actually, it's the backside of clitoris. It's actually a whole bundle of fibers and nerves, etc., that tie together. And I mentioned this number, 75%. And I mentioned the clitoris thing for a reason. One, there are a percentage of women who, by their recollection, have never in their life orgasmed. Period. There's some theories why that would be, but they don't know for sure. They do not know necessarily whether or not it is a physiological issue, a psychological issue. There is theories that some of it is caused by, and there are some women that suffer from this, that are caused by abuse issues when they were younger. But there's a percentage who never orgasm. Additionally, guys suck. Apparently, we think that our entire involvement is maybe some kissing, finally following boobs, and insert penis. And the problem with this is this, for some women, there's got to be some contact there with the clitoris or G-spot. The G-spot actually just being a part of essentially part of the same fiber. I can't remember the term. There's a term for it, and I've already lost it. Part of the same fiber bundle as the clitoris. This is from one set of thinking. Now, I said there was a belief that the vagina had the nerves, right? There's also a belief, and I read a study and I went, seriously, guys, which is it? That says the vagina, no women ever have orgasm from vaginal sex, ever. It's actually just accidental bumping the clitoris. And that there are insufficient nerves for there to ever be sufficient stimulation to cause an orgasm. I wish I was joking about this because it actually flies in the face of part of human sexuality in general. To say nobody ever. Because let me explain why I say nobody ever cannot be right. There are people who orgasm from having their boobs played with. There are women who will fall out orgasms having their boobs played with. There is a gal that's an odd neurological condition. She orgasms every time she brushes her teeth. Strange little miswiring in the brain, but it happens. The point is that there's no way this has happened. But I can say that there's enough people, I can say from personal experience, I'm not trying to share too much here, but most women I've known, if I stick a finger in here and I hit the right spot, they will orgasm almost every time. Not every woman I've known, but a lot. So I'm already calling bullshit on it. Additionally, where the factors are that people orgasm from things other than just the normative of sex anyways, I find everything else about this paper to have been completely and utterly dubious at that point. And I can't, but I bring it up as a contrast because some people still believe there's not enough nerves there for it to matter. Additionally, there's still the question, why do females orgasm? Guys orgasm for a reason. Our orgasms are tied with ejaculation. Why do women orgasm? There's still a question about that. We don't actually have a definitive answer. But at the cervix, the fallopian tubes. Wow, I could never be. You know what? In the future, I think Marshall is going to be in charge of drawing everything. This is a horrible drawing. The cervix and the fallopian tubes, and
A graduated cylinder on its side with a guy staring at it. Sorry, go ahead.
there. How's that? Anyways, point being, this is supposed to be fallopian tubes and etc. That it may have something to do with helping to draw sperm up, but nobody really knows for sure. It's one of those old things. We don't really, again, whole lot of science available that we could study, and we don't know. Because women don't have to
be
worry.
a topic scientists would be all over.
So what?
You think it would be a topic that some scientists would be all over.
I'm telling you, I picked the wrong field.
Yeah, you would be like, I'm gonna be a scientist when I grow up. I'm gonna study sex. This field is wide open.
That's what she said. Anyways. Now we have both vaginas and penises. Now goes for some of the myths. Start off with
Third option.
so what?
We need a third option.
No. And I'm not actually going to dive into sexuality and gender and all that. We've actually talked about those things before. I'm not saying they're unimportant. They literally just start causing the scope of this to blow up to such large size. We'd be another couple of weeks discussing this. But some people are born with them. Some people are born with one set of genitalia that may actually be mentally wired wrong. They may be born with male genitalia and identify as female. These things happen, and it's actually maybe even more fluid than that. The idea of gender just being a binary thing, or even a four-way thing where, okay, you start here and you switched here, you identify as one, but you're biologically another, is a lot more complicated than that.
We all start off as female as fetuses anyway.
And I'm just going to...
Zygotes, sorry.
So what?
So we all start off as female zygotes anyway.
So, and I'm going to... That's all I'm basically going to say about the sexuality portion of it. But just understand, yes, some people are born with them. Mainly rare. And then we're just going to throw that off the table because I don't want to deal with it again this time. Okay. Less than 10% of women experience pain during intercourse. Actually, that's a myth. 30%. It's actually quite prevalent. Additionally, and something I hadn't heard of, this actually came from a friend of mine recently. I had to look it up. I'm like, huh, wow. Some women experience nausea after sex. In fact, there's a whole range of discomforts that go on with it that can occur. But about 30% of women actually experience pain during sex. Pain is particularly at the beginning, and there's some debate whether or not that is simply a mismatched size issue. Because, by the way, we talked, we showed the, sizes of vagina and et cetera, et cetera. There's plenty of women that actually have a vagina that has to stretch considerably for an oversized penis. And it causes pain. Additionally, along with whether or not a whole lot of other issues, was there enough foreplay, is there enough lubrication? There's a number of physical ailments that will cause a lack of lubrication. Fortunately, we have products nowadays to help that too. But yes, that's actually a misconception that only 20%. HPV vaccine is unimportant. Yeah, that's a myth. There's a really huge myth. There are some people who say that actually what it's causing is causing cancer in women. We have no statistical data that really says that that's true, but we know that it's going to cause cancer in women if they catch HPV. So, yeah, you would think you'd go with the known that you're going to lower the risk of cancer. Additionally, this is what I didn't know. One of them come across, this is actually just an online thing. Boys don't need the HPV vaccine. This is a myth. Let's put it. The CDC recommends Gardasil vaccine for both guys and gals ages from 9 to 26. I didn't realize, the way I heard it was HPV vaccine was for the women. In reality, it's for both, because if you stop the carriers, then you stop the potential for an unvaccinated female, for instance, in catching. Makes good sense. Women are less interested in sex than men. The original Kinsley report that I mentioned earlier actually did indicate that women were less interested in sex. However, nobody knows whether that was testing bias at the time. Because keep in mind, the Kinsey, I said Kinsley again, didn't I? The Kinsey report actually was fairly error. There was a lot of people that had problems with how the reporting was done. Self-reporting is always problematic when you're talking about sex, because people will lie, but be too embarrassed. A certain percentage will. Additionally, there was all sorts of other statistical issues that came up. And again, if you have a sample set of 6,000 and they're mainly regionalized in a certain area, then you got a problem. There's all sorts of issues that occurred with it. So there's what this old data says, and we continue to believe this into modern era, but it's not true. Actually, men and women think about it the same. Men and women sexually peak at the same time. No. Women peak faster. No. Men peak faster. No, actually, there's actually not necessarily a defined concept of sexual peak to start with. There is still taught the idea of this. Bell curve showing us of sexual interest that happens and occurs at some sort of age. It's still taught. Not true. Apparently, sexual interest is literally such an individualized thing that no matter what the time frame in life is, most people still are experiencing it about the same. Whether or not they're still having sex or not, that's a different story. Going back to the STDs thing, putting two condoms on, doubles. I had not even heard this before. Putting two condoms on doubles your chances of not catching something. Well, that sounds like bullshit. Not only is it bullshit, it actually increases your chances. Apparently, when you double bag it, what happens is that the condom frictions on the inside and tears. It will tear both of them, thus increasing the chance of pregnancy and increasing the chance of STDs. And I keep using
take balloons and you rub them on each other.
Squeak, squeak, squeak.
Yeah, you can kind of get the idea of what that would be like.
Well, when you put it that way, that's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, they might be a little lubricated, but
Yeah,
you take anything and you make it ill-fitting, it's not going to do the job it's supposed to do.
Absolutely. Myth. All condoms are the same size.
Mm.
Also false.
Putting two on is going to automatically make it ill-fitting.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to insult anybody who might have given the question. I'm just saying the amount of ignorance is
It's fairly high. And the thing is that we, again, while we're talking about it, we perpetrate it by not talking about it.
it shocked me personally because I mean, it just seems to be common sense to me. But go on.
I tend to agree with you, but some things are just that way. Going back to the vagina, every woman has a G-spot. Nobody actually knows the answer to this.
That was cute.
So what?
So someone had a cute spot, somebody has a T. T for Zora.
Okay, the G's and the T's.
Some of them have a Doctor Who spot.
So what?
You have a Doctor Who spot.
Makes it cool moves. The answer to the whole G-spot debate, anyways, is nobody knows. Nobody knows for certain if every woman has a G-spot that is particularly an erogenous zone. Because the way it's mapped out, this stuff should be laying there for every person, for every woman, almost in exactly the same spot. Plus or minus an inch, which of course if you're talking about only the vagina, that's actually not a pretty good variance. But anyways, whether or not it's the G spot that we think of that gives her an orgasm, apparently the answer is pretty widely varied. Nobody has a definitive answer. Additionally, for a long time, nobody knew whether the G spot existed, and there's still some debate on whether or not it exists. However, most of the debate that I read was not from scientific circles. It's from, I swear, it is from most of them, the G spot does not exist, came from men writing articles, typically with very little support. I do not know why. I do not know why a guy would say, no, she's not really feeling that. Because of Chris Christie. Anyways,
It's pretty common for a guy to tell a woman that she's not feeling whatever she's feeling. It's pretty common. It happens all the time. That's why there's words like mansplaining.
Fair point. Yeah, the first time I ever heard mansplaining, I had to go, what the fuck did you just say?
I was like,
excuse me? What? And then when I heard the definition of it, I went,
oh,
my gender's assholes. Anyways.
That's not how you spell that.
Size matters. By the way, size matters as a question of vaginas or penises. Apparently matters a lot less than we culturally make it seem like it does, including, I want to know how they did this. Apparently studying kind of as a blind study thing to see whether or not women can tell the difference. Really, honestly, how much difference size mattered. How do you do that without?
that seems like an awkward thing to try to do.
I almost called bullshit on that one, but I'm sure somebody came up with a way of doing it.
50 Shades of Grayish to me.
I don't know. But actually, it ends up being, for most women, growth did matter to a certain degree. What women observed size of penis to be versus what it actually was quite erroneous a lot of times, because it depended on how turned on they were, because the size of the vagina actually changes depending on how turned on they were. What? I'll save it for later. Yeah, I'll save it for later. Some of the questions are so big that the answers were pretty odd to hunt down. And I won't consider them to be the best best of the stuff that I've got here. Okay. Let's go to oral sex. Again, another thing I wouldn't have thought there would have been a whole lot of. I can understand there would be technique questions. However, things that I did not know people would believe. Apparently, there are some people that believe that oral sex is safer than vaginal sex because you don't catch STDs. No, that's highly incorrect. Highly, highly, highly incorrect. Yeah. HPV, well, warts in general, and syphilis, and HPV, or HIV. I don't forget another one off the top of my head. Or all contractible. Herpes, that would say that. Herpes shows up as a cold sore, for instance, because they're actually related. The herpes simplex 1, simplex 2, simplex 3, all interrelated. Apparently, there are people who believe that they wouldn't catch anything because of this. Wow.
There's contact being made.
There is contact being made.
I don't think I
And
did
the
poison
human
ivy.
mouth
I
is
rubbed it on
actually
my
one of the
face.
more disease-ridden mouths. I mean, you can get a lot of. I mean, dogs' mouths are cleaner than humans are.
There's some truth to that.
And our human tooth bites can be really, really bad. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, actually, if you punch a person in the mouth and you end up with teeth marks, there's a particular set of injuries that occur because of the bacteria, and you end up with an infection across your knuckles.
Nasty stuff. Yeah.
That's pretty disgusting. To the point, and one of the reasons why I mentioned that one in particular is because it's something the cops actually look for. They can look at it and go, oh, you were in a fight a couple of days ago, you hit the guy in the mouth. So you go, no, you did not hit a cabinet. I recognize that infection. Additionally, when it comes to being dirty mouths, not only do we have dirty mouths, even with all of our technology and toothbrushing and ultrasonic toothbrushes and gargles and washes and et cetera, the way our teeth are structured are really good about getting a hold of a bacteria and hanging in there. Perfect spot, but right at the gums for it to thrive and spread. So, apparently there's also a small percentage, it's usually in the teens, that believe oral sex can get you pregnant. So quick diagram.
There's some senators that believe that too.
Yeah.
And we're going to go around the body. And this is we're going to say, colon and all that. This is the vagina area. And that is the worst drawing I've done ever. These are not connected. These are not connected to each other. No, you
Unless
can't.
there's massive trauma.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. There is a level of trauma that could occur, but I'm pretty certain you'd be in the hospital like that.
Right. You wouldn't be performing or receiving hopefully.
Oral sex is always unhygienic. Take that. That's all you got to do. Clean things up a lot. Some people believe that oral sex. One of them was oral sex and virginity. The idea that you've lost your virginity if you have oral sex. There's actually you will not have lost the physical virginity. The hymen will not get broken. The question actually, in the person who answered said, "Well, no, of course not. You haven't lost your virginity." And the thought in my head was, well, that depends on how you want to define all this. To a degree, You have not had sexual intercourse. You have had one of the forms of sex.
Form the second.
You have performed a sex act. Depending on how people want to define things, you have lost some of your condoms can't or shouldn't be used while giving or receiving oral sex. Incorrect, because that all STDs thing. Not only that, there are more than one type of products designed specifically for this, like dental dams. If you've never seen one, look it up someday. But yeah, I'm trying to find a good way of describing it. I got nothing. Anyways, dental dams and condoms actually are recommended for oral sex because you just won't catch the various diseases. Now this was an odd one because this is off, and I got this off the list. You know, these answers because I have to correlate with 2 questions I have gotten from people. And I'm going through this list, and I come to a complete stop on this question because the answer is kind of bullshit. Oral sex is a substitute for vaginal sex. And I'm going to read it verbatim. This myth is common amongst teenagers. They are convinced that it's a substitute for the natural form of sex that helps them remain sexually active. Expert response is, oral sex gives pleasure, but you can't use it as a substitute for vaginal sex. Agreed that hormones are high and biology is playing its role in the process, but there has to come a time and place for it. Teenagers tend to involve oral sex without actually knowing its pros and cons. It was a very confusing answer to me. You could have oral sex and not have vaginal sex. There's no reason why. And this is supposed to be an expert, a doctor,
Going ahead and telling him to have vaginal sex and not replace it with oral sex.
Yeah.
But don't worry about, teen pregnancy or anything like that.
I was a little confused by that. And again, this is the type of stuff I kept running into from time to time when you're looking into this.
I'm surprised the answer was not, if it's working for you,
Well, that's the best answer for it.
If it's working for you, why not? That should be like the main answer or summation of the whole point. It's like, if it's working for you.
And for once, I'm not kidding, for once we are right on the schedule I had in mind. This is amazing. Okay. Last major section. It's last major section. Okay, last major section. Anal sex. I'll admit, I got caught off guard by a couple of answers in there, in the fact that they were not what I expected to answer.
Sneak up on you?
So what?
Did they sneak up on you?
I'm just gonna leave that alone, man. There's no surprise butt sex here. Sorry.
You ought to say that.
What the hell did you just do? Okay, one of my figures was actually a complete and utter BS thing. Was that HIV was more contractable via anal sex than it was via vaginal sex. I figured this to be complete and utter bullshit. I was wrong. Come to find out, it is actually more transmittable through anal sex, through unprotected anal sex. Because the membranes are thinner and it doesn't have a defense mechanism. It's not designed to have a defense mechanism. Oh, wait, let me roll back for just a second. So when I'm studying this, start off with, I'm kind of getting a laugh at the fact I'm sitting over at a friend's house looking up anal sex. It's not the strangest thing I've ever done in life, but it's starting to rank up there. Things I never expected I was going to be doing with First Week Congregation. Talking about anal sex was definitely not one of them. So I'm reading up on some of this stuff, and I've been reading up various articles off and on. And one of the things that stuck out in my mind was a set of articles that, again, completely contrasted each other. One of them was talking about, yeah, anal sex is great for the person giving it, but it's not so good for the receiver. There's not enough nerves there for it to matter. Yeah, okay. I read another article. Anal sex is awesome for the person receiving because there are so many nerves there that are typically not stimulated.
Mutually exclusive.
One of you is an asshole. And I'm not sure which one yet. So we're going to have to study.
Topical.
So what?
Topical.
Yes. It really, honestly, it was actually, we talked, I talked about how bad the sample sets were for vaginas and things like that. Now, forget it. Forget it.
There is no measurement on how standard ass size is, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I think the standard asshole size is about 5'9".
You usually have an R after their name.
But additionally, most of the articles on this subject, when it comes to sex experts and doctors and stuff like that, surprisingly weird in the fact that most of the time it was kind of more of a personal advice thing rather than hard fact. But I'll run through real quick, like one example article. And this is written by some little old lady a little gray-haired lady who looks like she's somebody's grandma. And I'm like, I get to the end of the article, I'm like, no, see, I can't. No, I'm not going to take anal sex advice from that, from somebody's grandma. Anyways, this kind of encapsulates, though, what most of these articles I ran across on anal sex were like. Which boils down to, here are the 5 myths about anal sex I'm happy to debunk. It's dirty. And the answer is a little messy and it's concur, but it doesn't have to. It hurts. Apparently, some people don't know what lubrication and trust is. It's not loving. Well, whatever you do between you and your partner, that one of the two of you agree, why would it matter what anybody else? Apparently, some people feel that that is a dirty act of domination against your partner. Okay. You'll feel dishonored. Your friends will disapprove. Why your friends are disapproving or approving of your sex
You're
life?
gonna run right out and tell.
I'm imagining those boards that people hold up at the Olympics, like, or,
I'm only going to give it a 3.2.
what?
Not enough lube.
Why are you involved?
Disrespect. Round 2.
But here's what I'm going to say to anybody who happens to be watching this later on YouTube. Here's my suggestion to you. If you're ever thinking about anal sex, read up on it. Because I'm not going to go through the entire thing here. And there's no statistics on how large an asshole
I'm
is.
gonna draw a diagram.
No.
Where's the diagrams now, David? Chocolate star.
There we go. Good enough for you?
You've got a bright idea.
Anyways, read up on it. And the reason why I say this, a lot of the articles I've read talk about the potential for physical pain involved, the potential for tearing, micro tears, of bleeding, of any number of things from this. They usually are associated with if you're not careful. Because they also give a whole lot of advice of, hey, this is how you do it. This is what you need to look for lubrication. This is what you do. And I'm not going to go through all of it. There's just no way. There's no time for it. And apparently this is, and nor, I'll be honest, nor any desire on my part to talk about anal sex at that level. But if you're thinking about doing, actually research this. Don't do this as a whim, apparently. This is, apparently you or your partner may not enjoy this at all. But if you prepare for it, yes, there's a great chance you could enjoy it. Now then, having said all that about oral sex and anal sex, let's talk about the law for a moment. Because there's some problems. In 2002, we finally had a federal this term when Supreme Court strikes something down. Decision. Ruling. Thank you. Finally had a Supreme Court ruling that allowed basically most state laws banning homosexuals from having anal sex or from having sex period are actually against federal law at this point. Kansas still has them on the books, for instance. 14 states still have them on the books. Some states actually have them on the books for both couples, for both types of couples, with same sex and intersex. Well, how do you say that as the opposite of same sex?
Heterosexual.
Heterosexual. There we go. How about couples? Yeah. That basically didn't matter which orientation was going on. Oral sex and or anal sex were penalized. And Kansas was one of those. We've actually dropped half of it. Now our laws are specifically against homosexuals. But if it ever comes up to an actual point of law and an arrest, probably it will get struck down as unconstitutional.
It's like jaywalking. I mean, if they're not, I guess if they're not having anal sex on a busy highway or across a busy highway, they're not hurting anybody.
I have no response to this. Yeah, I got nothing. So, anyways, there is still an element of the idea that the law has anything to do with what you do with your sexual partner in a consenting basis. That's a bit of a problem. That's something, though, however, if you look at the laws that have existed over time, we've been cleaning that up. Throughout the U.S., we're slowly but surely cleaning up our laws and removing those. There are some places that still can't own sex toys, for instance. Those are considered to be illegal unless they're a therapeutic use, doctor-prescribed thing. Good luck with that.
Where's your RX?
That's just disturbing. So, doc, I want to build up. I need a prescription for it. What do I need a prescription for? No, it's not going to make a whole lot of sense.
Scrambling in Europe.
That's a great question. I don't know the
It's
answer.
a great question. You should hit the laws. It's state statutes.
You know, I'm not going to do that right now because I will end up down a tunnel.
Oh, sorry.
2 hours later, I'll still be sitting here. I'll get back to you in just a minute.
Next Sunday they're still here. Yeah. Unshaven. Welcome to First Week Congregation. I haven't eaten or slept since Marshall asked that question. Well, I've drank tea. Lots of tea.
Lots of tea, yes. Okay, anyways. So you have to watch out for that. But speaking of the consensual portion, one of the myths that still persists is that rape and sexual assault happen primarily to women. The answer, the reality is actually a little more interesting. This is what the belief was find the date for this. I think the answer was almost 20 years ago. Great, now I can't find the statistic. I thought I saved the link to it. But I remember it was actually kind of shocking to me. The point was that it used to be reported about 17% of sexual assaults were upon men. That's what was reported. Now, starting to reach 38%.
More people are probably reporting it.
That's the thing, because right before it was such a pride issue that why would you tell anybody ever that you were sexually assaulted? By the way, that includes being sexually assaulted by, and this should be specified as rape and sexual assault, because the legal definitions can be two different things. But there's the belief men can't be raped. Can't rape the willing. Men always
Well,
want sex.
that's assuming that men are always willing.
Assuming men are always willing, which is not the case. We do not think of sex every 9 seconds on the average. Instead, we actually, on the average, think of sex 19 times a day. That's the average. We think of food 18, by the way.
But that doesn't mean you want to be force-fed.
That's absolutely true. And additionally, this
You
number,
want control of what you're eating.
this number is supposed to actually is believed to be still a little bit low. That we haven't really reached a point of equality where men feel it's okay. But keep in mind, we also know that rape is underreported horribly anyways. Both genders do it. And let's see if I can give 9 out of 10 cases, rape or sexual assault is committed by somebody. Boyfriend, educator, priests, just a number of people that are usually in their trusted circle is who do it. The myth of some gal walking down the street and getting attacked, that does happen 1 out of 10 times. But that's not the most likely chance for it to occur. This is actually filed. Ooh, wow. I mentioned the whole genital mutilation thing, and this actually got thrown into the sexual violence pile. It's an estimated somewhere between 100 million to 400 million worldwide have been subjected to female genital mutilation, and 3 million girls every year. So that women can't enjoy sex. That's the whole idea.
Well, and the cultural stuff that's underlying it is the same for male circumcision. They think that it's a cleanliness issue and that in order for women to have kids, they need to do this. I mean, I had an anthropology class where there was a bunch of interviews that were on like tape that they had gone out and interviewed people that were doing female circumcision with razors on girls that were like preteens, and they were like, "We've got to do this, otherwise they might die in pregnancy." And it's like, this is not something you have to do. There's a lot of people in the world that don't do this.
You understand they're born like this naturally.
Yeah.
Why would something
But
be born?
we do the same thing with guys.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens
You
with
just
both.
don't do it as
Yeah, I'm just like.
Oh, absolutely.
Why would
I mean, we don't like cut the head
That's
off.
That's a range of things, though. Some of the female circumcisions aren't as extensive as the other ones. I mean, you did point out that there
Yeah,
are
some
some
of
that
it
go
is, you
way
might take a little bit of the hood off, and some of them you might take to all the way to the point of there's nothing left.
Yeah.
It's every time I ever
Once again, that flies back to
When we
common sense.
talk about female circumcision, we always say genital mutilation, but we don't say that about male circumcision. It's similar things, but we have a cultural reason we accept it for male circumcision, and we just don't even listen to the cultural reasons on the other one.
oh,
But
absolutely.
it's hilarious, the parallels.
It's the exact same thing.
Conceptually it is very similar.
You just attach different reasons to it.
No, actually I'm going to say similar for a reason, not the same thing. The reason why I make the differentiation: guys who have had a circumcision will most likely have a pleasurable sex life.
Unless it's a botched circumcision.
Unless it's a botched circumcision, and then all bets are off, including getting HIV. Oddly enough, that was a case that occurred, was a baby ending up with HIV. For people who don't know, there is a tradition among certain Jewish cultures that the circumcision is done with the teeth. It's a very specific process, and you basically. And I've always been curious where the hell this started from. Strikes me as an odd choice. Teeth are not a particularly precise instrument to start with.
Reading their morals well enough.
And we've already talked about the fact that we like to harbor a lot of disease in our mouth anyways. We're very unclean creatures. And then for some reason we think it's okay to bite a baby's penis.
Yeah.
Anyways, apparently one rabbi had been infected with something that he passed it on. The idea of being infected with something and passing it on through the mouth has actually happened more than once with circumcisions done that way. The one in particular that sticks in my mind, I believe it was HIV positive, which brings some interesting questions about a rabbi who's HIV positive. So what?
Well, transfusions and whatnot.
It's
Benefit of the doubt.
yeah. The man is putting baby penises in his mouth. Yeah. I'm just going to throw that out there. Okay. Let's go back. Wow. Anyways, fortunately now, when it comes to sexual assault and things like this, at least here in the U.S., we're starting to get more savvy. We're starting to get the idea of trying to, and I hate the term rape culture. I really hate the term rape culture. It implies that I, who a white male, has somehow been brought up to be a rapist. That's the implication always to me when I hear a lot of rape culture discussions. I have never raped anyone. I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
Well, you have to acknowledge that generally in the culture, if somebody gets attacked, everybody's first inclination is to blame the victim. But that's for almost anything. I mean, if you have somebody that walks into your house unbidden, the first thing people are going to ask is, "Did you lock your door?"
Yeah, or there's the cases of, this happened a while back. Somebody's house got shot up. It was a friend of a friend of a friend thing, and someone said about it. And my first reaction, I said it, and I realized what came out of my mouth. I asked, so what was going on? That
Yeah,
somebody
you're
felt the need to shoot up.
assuming that somebody came and when we had that thing where the police came out because somebody threw a garden rock through a window, the police were all, what do you mean you don't have any enemies? Oh, well, maybe it's an ex-boyfriend then. And I haven't had a boyfriend in more than, 15 years? We've been married 15 years. And I hadn't had a boyfriend for maybe a year prior to that.
Gotcha.
So
and you're right.
it's
It
crazy.
happens. It happens. Now, when it
But
comes,
that's in our culture. That's an automatic response. People don't necessarily sit around and go, well, clearly, since you've been attacked, you did it. You know, they're not, you know, sitting around plotting everything. But the culture makes you ask these questions.
yeah, you're right.
And
You're
if
right.
you don't question why you're asking these questions, then you do it automatically like it's the most natural thing in the world. And culture blinds you to things. You just assume that's how humans are.
And I will admit, there are times where I have a hard time, for lack of a better term, connecting with other people, understanding how they think. My first wife was a volunteer at WASAC, Wichita Area Sexual Assault Center.
Oh.
So that whole blame the victim mentality, that was gone real quick with me, from that standpoint, because once I heard a lot more about what happens, how it happens, et cetera, what's happening with women, no, I didn't blame. Yeah, no, that was gone out of my head at that point. In fact, actually, usually my response, honestly, I wish I could find the file for these, you know, women, so I could hunt down the guy, or sometimes the woman, and be violent about it. I mean, quite honestly, the things that happen to these people is pretty bad. And so I got rid of that mentality that way. But you're right, you know, in other areas of the culture, I still have that at times. And it's a horrible thing. It's a habit we need to get out of. Okay, she got raped. Well, what was she doing there? No. That's not the question. That's not the question. He got shot. What was he doing there? No.
Oh, he must have been wearing something to get shot.
That's not the question. So we do need to change our thinking on that and consider it. There's a lot of other, again, I hate the term rape culture, but a lot of other rape culture issues that need to be addressed. Fortunately, it's one of those beautiful times in society where you're seeing people actually actively trying to bring this out as a message. The idea of consent, the idea of that, one, we're not beasts, they're not under our control. All these ideas are probably getting talked about more in the last 3 or 4 years than they have in the previous decades. It's fantastic. It's nice to see some sort of change happen. Okay, we're running out of time here, so I think I'm going to see. I'm just going to go through the hit list here at the end. This last bit, some of them actually lined up with questions that were asked or statements that were made, but we're also off of some of the big honking lists of myths and you know, fallacies from sex. Aphrodisiacs don't exist. There's no aphrodisiac food. There's no proven aphrodisiac food. However, I do go along with the old joke of if you're on a date, eating raw oyster is not a bad idea, because if you eat raw oyster, you'll eat anything. I always thought that was a great joke. It's actually a horrible joke. But men think about sex more than women? No. Pulling out means you won't get married, you won't get pregnant. No. 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 And no. Not your idiot. Pre-ejaculation sometimes does or does not contain sperm. There's actually different writings on that, different theories on that. Additionally, a lot of guys, it actually requires a great deal of self-control. Most guys do not have that level of self-control. You won't get pregnant if you have sex while you're menstruating. Incorrect. Sperm will live for up to 6 days. And so depending on exactly where you're at in the cycle and everything else, you can still get pregnant. Orgasm for women is supposed to be earth-shattering, and if not so, you're not normal. Actually, it comes down to the thing of being, everybody's an individual. Not everybody experiences everything the same way. She doesn't make pleasure noises, she's not enjoying sex. Actually, again, an individual thing. Some people are this way, some people are that way. And some people have kids. They've learned to be quiet. Just saying. Men are not naturally monogamous, but women are. Absolutely wrong. Both biologically and mentally, women are just as capable of monogamous relationships as men, and both sexes are capable of being polyamorous. There's not really a whole lot of differentiation besides cultural stereotypes. A man must have an erection to enjoy sex. Not necessarily true. Women are less interested in sex than men. Definitely not true. It usually ends up being about equal. The problem that where it comes from usually ends up being unequal couples, or the man or the woman is more interested in the other, and that's where a lot of the myth comes from. Men less ejaculate experience. We already covered that one. There's this. Covered that one. Covered that one. Covered that one. That is it. I actually reached the end. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so having reached the end of all that, almost out of battery power. Any thoughts or questions? I know I covered a lot of stuff from a lot of people, but did anybody raise any other questions that we had? No? Okay, awesome. Good. Okay. We will be back next week with First New Congregation, and we're going to do a buffet of religion. Some people say you can't pick and choose from religious texts. Some people say that maybe there's not that bad of an idea after all, because we don't understand the context. Anyways, we'll be back next week with that, so we'll be back on regular religion finally. We're done with sex. Really, this is the end. For no more sex talk for a while. However, in all honesty, maybe in a year we may do this again. The idea being, I'm going to leave that form up, and we're going to see if anything else ends up being netted that is just like, oh my goodness, yeah, actually we should talk about it, but we'll wait a year before we do. Anyways, I hope if you're watching this that you actually did learn something. Even with all the stuff that I covered, there's so much more I could have covered, and there's no way to cram it all in at once. That's what she said. So, anyways, have a good one, and if Marshall will hit that button for you to turn off the thing, that'd be awesome.